My name is Claire. All my life I have lived for my children ever since my husband passed away unexpectedly. I became their sole support. Acting as both mother and father, I took on every worry. I never complained. Not once did I consider living for myself. I only wish that as I grew older, I could be surrounded by my children and grandchildren in a warm home filled with laughter and plentiful meals. Yet life sometimes differs from those quiet hopes we hold within. One day, my eldest son, Alexander, suggested we take a trip together. He said he wanted to surprise me and that he longed for us to share some alone time, just mother and son. I was so happy I cried. What mother would not feel joyful knowing her son remembers her? I prepared everything with the excitement of a child about to play for the very first time. However, that trip was not the gift I had imagined. Soon enough, I realized I had been left behind in the heart of a pine forest blanketed in white snow, with no one in sight and no way out. My son, the person I loved most and trusted fully, vanished without looking back. I buried my pain in the freezing cold. I screamed into the strange silence of nature, yet I did not die. I rose. I endured. I saved myself not only with my breath, but with every ounce remaining in the heart of a betrayed mother. And you know what? Just when I believed I had lost everything, life opened a new path for me. I am no longer the one who was abandoned, but the one who keeps moving forward. Full of energy, and with my heart more filled than ever, I do not know where you come from or what wounds you carry. But if you are reading this, I want to tell you only one thing. We might stumble, yet we must never allow anyone else to decide where we remain stuck forever. Thank you for being here. You, a unique person among the countless individuals who have heard my life story. My husband passed away young when my oldest son, Alexander, was only 8 years old. The day he left, heavy rain poured down non-stop. I did not allow myself to break down because my 2 children were curled up behind me, their hands cold and trembling. I remember holding them both, gently stroking them and whispering, "It is all right. Mom is here." From that moment, I took on the role of both father and mother. I did everything to earn money. I washed clothes for others, did house chores, and sewed, only so my children would have food, clothing, and could attend school. I cannot recall how many sleepless nights I endured or how many meals I missed. I just remember that towards the end of the month, I sometimes went hungry to be able to give milk to the little ones. During winter nights, I wrapped them tightly in blankets and stayed awake until dawn because I did not have enough firewood to keep them warm. I've never bragged about my achievements nor demanded anything from my children. Alexander is my greatest pride. He was a good student, obedient, and always stood up for his mother. Once he stepped between me and a neighbor who was scolding me. The mother of your children works tirelessly to support them. Do not speak like that. I heard those words and thought that it was reasonable to believe that as long as I was patient enough, he would never leave me. When he was growing up, Alexander often held my hand and told me, "Do not worry, Mom. When you are older, I will build you a big house. I will hire a helper to do the household chores for you. You will no longer have to struggle." I believed those words. They were the driving force that kept me moving forward. A pure and tender faith, like the gentle way one embraces a small dream. All my life I have lived just for my children. Every hurt, every drop of sweat I have shed was for that reason. I never imagined having to tell my life story as a sad tale. But perhaps there comes a moment for each of us when we realize that love alone is not enough to hold someone back if that person has chosen to leave. I thought that once my children grew up, life would become somewhat easier. I would no longer spend nights sewing torn clothes or days selling vegetables in the rain, nor would I worry about how to get rice for tomorrow's meal today. I pictured old age as a time to live surrounded by my children and grandchildren, sharing laughter, warm meals, and occasionally reminiscing with old stories. I did not expect that the peace I longed for would be the very first thing to fall apart. When Alexander got married, Lucy entered my home with a radiant wedding. It was not that she was unkind. There was no reason for me not to like Lucy in those early days. She was attractive, intelligent, and spoke softly when she smiled. That smile alone was enough to make others feel at ease. I looked at her and thought, I have taught my son to choose a woman like this. It is all right. On the wedding day, Alexander took my hand and whispered, "Do not worry, Mom. No matter what happens, you will always be the most important person in my life." I believed him. That was my first mistake. After the wedding, I continued living in the small house my husband had left me. To be honest, I did not want to inconvenience the newlywed couple, but one day Alexander came over. He sat with me for a long time and then said, "This house is damp, and in winter it gets very cold. Come live with us. Our house is large. We have a room for you. You will be much happier." I felt my heart warm up. I imagined us having dinners together at night. I would prepare some dishes Alexander and Lucy liked. They would help me season the food. I could play with the grandchild I had always longed for. I nodded in agreement. When I moved, I took a few clothes, some old books, and the family photo frame with me. I did not bring much. I always thought that my presence alone was enough. At first, I tried to fit in. Every morning, I got up early to cook and clean without waiting for anyone to ask. I thought, if I do this well, Lucy will feel more comfortable. But she began showing small signs that made me uneasy. For instance, she would enter the kitchen just after I finished cooking. Maybe it all seemed natural to her. And when we ate, Lucy always said, "Oh, this is way too salty." Surely someone had added too much salt. At first, I laughed it off. Then I stopped laughing. One time, I brought food to Alexander, a fish stew he loved. Then I overheard Lucy talking on the phone with a friend saying, "Imagine living with my mother-in-law. Every day feels like sharing a house with a live camera." I do not even dare to laugh out loud. I was frozen. The fish dish grew cold in my hands. I put it down and threw it away. I told myself, she must be tired. I started shutting myself off. I didn't interfere. I didn't ask questions. I avoided touching her things, and it was unnecessary anyway. I cleaned quietly, washed my clothes separately, ate alone when the two of them went out. Every time I heard young voices laughing in the living room, I went up to my room and shut the door. I thought it would be easier that way for everyone. But no, it didn't stop there. Lucy began noticing every detail. One day she opened the fridge, spotted the lunchbox I had saved for myself, and laughed, saying, "You should put your name on it. Don't pretend and risk someone messing up and getting mad." I nodded and said yes, I would. I taped my name on the lunchbox like a child marking their food as I stuck it on. My hands were trembling. I did not know whether it was the cold or the humiliation I felt. Lately, Alexander has been speaking very little. Every time I try to start a conversation, he just replies, "Yes, of course," out of politeness. Sometimes I ask if he remembers the soup we used to have when he was little, and he simply answers, "Now my tastes are different. Do not make me those old dishes." Each time he says that, I feel like I am becoming a stranger in the heart of my own son. I do not blame Lucy, but I blame myself for believing that the love between a mother and her child is something unchangeable. One day, I overheard a conversation that I was not supposed to hear. Lucy told Alexander in a calm voice, "I don't want to keep living like this forever. I feel smothered by your mother here. I need a home for my family, a place where nobody interferes. I do not feel comfortable, Alexander. What if you keep allowing things to stay this way? Maybe I will reconsider this marriage." Alexander was silent for a long time. I was outside, my heart about to burst. After a while, He said very gently, "I understand." That night, Alexander came into my room and asked, "Do you want to take a trip? I recently read that there is a pine forest covered in white snow. It is very beautiful. You once said you wanted to see snow." "Really? I do not want to take you there." I looked up to meet his eyes. It was the first time in many months he invited me somewhere. I was so happy I almost cried. I nodded and said, "I have never truly seen snow with you by my side." "Are you sure it is not cold?" I packed my belongings into a bag, holding a flicker of hope within my heart. I wondered aloud, who knows? Maybe this will be a chance for my son and me to grow closer. Little did I realize that in that very moment, I was stepping into the conclusion of everything I had believed in. We set off early one morning. A thin mist lingered in the air. The wind was gentle, yet the chill stung my skin sharply. Alexander was driving while I sat silently in the front passenger seat throughout the journey. He barely spoke, only occasionally turning to give me a smile before refocusing on steering. I did not ask any questions either. My heart felt like an old patched-up shirt, mended so many times that its original fabric was barely recognizable. After nearly 2 hours on the road, the car turned onto a forest path. From there, only pine trees and snow surrounded us. Rows of trees stood still, their branches blanketed in white snow resembling a cold ash layer. I had never witnessed a sight so eerie, not just because of the biting cold, but due to the overwhelming silence and emptiness that mirrored the feeling swelling inside me. Alexander pulled the car to a stop in a clearing nestled between 2 snow-covered slopes. No houses or cars were visible nearby. I felt somewhat puzzled, so I turned to ask him, "Are we there yet?" He nodded and then got out to open my door, saying simply, "Get out. I want you to appreciate this place. It is truly beautiful." I stepped down onto the frozen snow, my feet sinking slightly as I heard the crisp crack of the icy layer beneath. The cold air made me feel a little dizzy, yet I still tried to smile. I looked around and saw a long row of pine trees casting their shadows over the white snow. The wind blew gently, causing some branches to move and letting solitary snowflakes fall. I whispered, "This is so beautiful. But why is it so empty? We are not going into the tourist area." There was no answer. I turned around and saw that the car had already turned. In that moment, I spotted Alexander, the son I had loved all my life, sitting behind the wheel with a distant look in his eyes. I called out to Alexander. I thought he was just turning the car, but then he sped up. The car moved slowly forward along the old path, kicking up a mist of snow. I ran after him without thinking. My feet slipped in the snow. It was freezing. It hurt. I shivered. "Alexander, what are you doing? Stop that!" I shouted with a hoarse voice from cold and fear. The car did not stop. It got farther and farther until it disappeared behind the trees, leaving me alone, standing frozen in the middle of the snowy forest. I remained motionless for a long time. I could no longer hear the wind. I could no longer feel anything beneath my feet. Only a huge emptiness remained inside my chest. I trembled not from the cold, but because I could not believe it. Alexander had left me behind in a place with no return, no signal. A deserted telephone booth stood there with no one in sight. Only the approaching death surrounded me. I sat down with snow reaching up to my knees. Breathing became laborious. Then tears started to flow. I cannot say how long I cried. Resting my head on my knees, I let the snow slowly cover my shoulders, my hair, even the hope I had nurtured my entire life. I believed I was going to die right there. No one would know. No one would look for me. No one would remember. When the sun set towards the west, I began to feel the numbness turn into pain. I barely sensed the tips of my fingers. I had to get up. I did not want to die, at least not like this. I started dragging my feet, going anywhere just not to remain still. The pine trees followed one after another. The deeper I went, the thicker the snow became and the stronger the wind blew. I staggered like a lost person. Sometimes I fell face down, my face buried in the thick snow. I wanted to lie down, but then an image appeared in my mind. The face of Alexander as a child. The first time he learned to walk, holding onto my legs, beaming with joy. I got up unsteadily. My hands were so cold I could not feel the snow melting on my skin. I saw a rotten log. I sat down to rest a while. My trembling hands searched in my coat pocket, hoping to find something. There was only a piece of tissue paper and a small pack of sugar, something I always carry in my bag to prevent low blood sugar. I opened the package of sugar and let it dissolve on my tongue. The sweet taste faded quickly, but it was not enough to keep me warm. The light started to fade. I knew that if I did not find shelter, I would not make it through the night. I kept walking. Every step was a struggle. I had no idea where I was going. I was moving forward just to survive. I walked so I would not die feeling abandoned and alone. I do not know how long I kept walking. The sun had already set. Everything turned into a cold, bluish-gray hue. Just as I was about to collapse, I saw a flickering light in the distance. Maybe it was a tent, a ranger's cabin, or only a trick of my tired mind. I dragged myself closer. It was a small makeshift hut made from old wood and canvas. No one was inside, yet there was a rusty iron stove and some damp logs stacked in one corner. I shivered uncontrollably as I tried to start a fire. My hands kept rubbing together, desperate for warmth. I knew nothing about survival, but at that moment I understood only one thing. I had to live. The fire caught weakly. I sat very close and took off my shoes. My feet were numb, turning almost purple. I wrapped my arms around myself, holding on to whatever strength I had left. Then, in that quiet, I whispered, "Have you really abandoned me?" I no longer cried. For the first time in my life, my tears had dried up. There was nothing left to shed. All I had left was myself. A mother, a woman, a living soul trying to hold on to her final breath in the midst of a snowy forest. I do not know how long I had been asleep inside that cabin. When I woke up, the fire had gone out, and darkness engulfed the surroundings. I could no longer feel my hands or feet. My body was stiff, as rigid as a log. My mind was clouded and confused. Outside, the wind howled relentlessly, beating against the tarp on the roof, causing pieces of fabric to knock together with icy cracks. I tried to move, and a faint groan escaped my lips. My chest ached. My throat was dry like parchment, yet I was still breathing. That meant there was still a chance for me. I crawled to the door and gently lifted a flap to get some fresh air. Dawn was breaking. A pale light draped the snow with a sorrowful, silvery shine. I noticed an old tire track, blurred and cold like a wound cutting through my heart. For some reason, I was no longer afraid. I only felt empty. A few hours later, I heard a motor sound. At first, I thought it was a hallucination, but the noise became clearer, the steady purring of a car engine drawing nearer. I stood up abruptly and staggered out of the cabin. The snow reached up to my ankles. Waving my hand clumsily, I shouted with a hoarse voice, "Help! Is anybody out there? I am here." The engine noise stopped. I saw an old pickup truck slowly approaching through the forest. The door suddenly swung open, and a middle-aged man rushed toward me. Behind him was a small woman wearing a red scarf. I collapsed before I could say a word. When I regained consciousness, I found myself lying on a wooden bed. A warm, golden light seeped through a tiny window, and I heard the crackling of firewood somewhere nearby. The place felt strange, yet familiar, like a blend of dreams and reality. I turned and saw the woman placing a warm cloth on my forehead. She smiled gently and said, "You are awake now. Thank God." I tried to sit up, but my strength was gone. My entire body ached, and I felt tingling sensations as if countless needles were pricking me. The woman went on, "You had severe hypothermia. We found you close to the old guard cabin. If we had been any later..." I wanted to ask why they were there, but my throat only managed a faint whistle. At that moment, the man came in carrying a cup of warm water and handed it to me. "I am Ernesto. This is my wife, Anna. We live 10 kilometers from here. We inspect the old forest road every month because we used to work as park rangers. It is a good thing we came today. Otherwise, who knows?" I took a sip of the water. My eyes blurred, not from pain, but because it was the first time in many years someone called me madam without hesitation or discomfort. I wept very softly. Only 2 tears rolled down my wrinkled cheeks. Quiet like my own life, I stayed at their home for 10 days. It was a small wooden house, simple yet strangely inviting. Anna cooked, caring for me with every spoonful of soup. Ernesto brewed tea every afternoon, and we talked like old friends sharing stories from the past. No one asked why I was in the snowy forest. No one questioned where I came from or what had happened. They were just close enough for me to feel I was not alone, yet far enough away so I could have moments of silence without feeling overwhelmed. Gradually, I began to heal. The crack in my heart started to mend, though deep inside, a pain still lingered. One night, as I sat silently by the fire, Anna approached and handed me a notebook and a pen. I heard her speak softly, as if in a dream. "It seems you carry many memories. Write them down. It will help ease your soul." I took the pen and opened the first page. My hand trembled, but the first words formed smoothly, as if the story had long been inside my heart, waiting for a place to be released. I wrote about the snow, about the cold night, about the car that vanished. I did not write my son's name because I did not want to turn him into an enemy. Instead, I wrote about the woman who had been a mother, who had sacrificed, who had trusted and then been left alone in the ice. Anna read the initial draft and remained quietly still. He embraced me, holding me gently. Ernesto said if there is anyone who needs to read this, it is the elderly who live quietly, just as you once did. This is something that should be shared. So I began to tell the story to my new friends in the small village. The lonely elderly gathered to listen, their eyes shining as I read aloud. They nodded along, smiled warmly, and some even shed tears. I do not recall exactly when my laughter began to return. It was neither loud nor deeply echoing, but it was genuine, like a tiny snowflake melting softly in the palm of a hand, fragile yet authentic. I still remember that snowy night clearly. The look in my son's eyes as he turned the car and left will remain with me forever. Yet now I no longer carry bitterness. I was the one who was left behind. Now I am the one who stays. I choose to remain with those who truly listen. I choose to live with kindness, with no strings attached. I do not expect anyone to repay me. I do not seek apologies from others. What I need is myself. And I have found myself again among the ashes of a life I once believed was no longer worth living. After writing the first lines in the notebook given to me by Anna, I couldn't stop. Every morning I woke up, even before the rooster crowed. I prepared a small teapot and sat down in the corner of the wooden table by the window. The soft morning light bathed the blank page. My hand no longer trembled as it held the pen like it did on the very first day. I wrote fragments of memories that seemed to have decayed with time, but when those thoughts turned into words again, they came through clear and warm in an unusual way. I wrote about my youth, the nights I stayed awake late sewing clothes for my children. I wrote about the afternoons I returned home after the market, walking and practicing lessons with my youngest son. I recalled the first time Alexander stepped onto the stage to receive an award and searched for my eyes in the crowd. I described meals when my 3 children sat together, sharing pieces of stewed fish. I no longer wrote with bitterness, but only about things that were beautiful and real. Every night Claire would read those pages. She often closed the notebook, put her hand on her chest, and sighed as if reliving an entire life through each word. One day she suggested I try reading to others. In the village, there is a center for the elderly where those living alone gather every weekend to play crossword puzzles, sing boleros, or simply listen to the radio. Claire said, "Go there to read. They will understand you." At first, I hesitated. But then, on a Saturday afternoon, I brought the notebook, which was already more than half full, and sat in the corner of the small room at the center. About 15 elderly folks were there, some with canes, others in wheelchairs, some wearing thick glasses. They fell silent as I opened the notebook. No one asked me to share anything. When I first began, no one looked away. I read as if speaking directly to my younger self from many years ago. My voice moved slowly and gently. Occasionally it cracked, yet no one laughed. No one rushed me. There was only a quiet understanding. Eyes glistened with tears, a soft nod of agreement. After the initial reading, someone whispered, "I thought I was alone in feeling abandoned." From that moment on, I returned every week. I did not only share sad tales, but also wrote about small, beautiful moments like the scent of freshly baked cake filling the house on Sunday mornings, the sound of my son's footsteps on cold nights, running to hug me after a nightmare, or the first time I witnessed snow when it stopped being a dream and turned into a harsh, revealing reality. One morning, the center's director, a reserved yet compassionate man, approached me with a suggestion. "Mrs. Claire, I believe you should organize a session to share your stories officially, not only here, but with more seniors across the region than you might expect, those living quietly, longing to be heard. You do not only write well, you are healing as you speak." I was silent for a long while, then nodded. I, the woman who once thought old age meant retreating to the kitchen, was now stepping onto a small stage with a microphone trembling slightly in my hand, facing unfamiliar but somehow familiar faces. I told my stories. They listened. After every session like that, I received small notes, some handwritten lines, others signed, just like an elderly woman of 75 years who's been rejected by her daughter. Others were writing too. She did not say anything about me. Thank you. For the very first time in my life, I felt that I had a voice, not to seek pity, but to touch the hearts of those who had believed it was no longer worth listening. One day, Anna looked at me with eyes shining bright and deep. Claire. She does not realize how many people she ignites a flame in. She possesses a rare gift. She makes people remember they once had a warm heart. I did not know how to respond. I simply smiled, a genuine smile, not forced or shy. I have lived more than half my life just to be a mother. Now I am learning to be Claire, a woman who knows how to love herself, who knows how to walk through winter without trembling, who knows how to rise from falls that seemed impossible to overcome. I no longer write to release my sorrow. I write to preserve the beautiful things. I tell stories to make connections. I live not for my son to remember me, but to avoid forgetting myself. That afternoon, the sky was gray. The wind whispered through the wooden roof of Anna and Ernesto's small house. I was sitting folding the pages of the draft, preparing for the reading the following week, when I heard a car stop outside. Silence, but sudden like a foot that stops after running for too long. I did not lift my gaze. I only furrowed my brow slightly. Ernesto came into the kitchen. He looked into my eyes for a moment and then spoke softly. "Claire, someone outside is asking for you. A man. It seems he has traveled a great distance to get here. I had left the papers behind. I stood up. I knew. Without glancing, without hearing the name, I knew who it was. I stepped outside. The wooden door creaked open slightly. The man had his back turned to me, clutching his old cap tightly, his shoulders trembling faintly. He turned around when he heard my footsteps. His gaunt face, sunken eyes, and that familiar expression I thought I had locked away long ago. It was Alexander. No phone call, no warning. He came as if he were still the son running home to find his mother whenever it rained. But this time, it wasn't raining. Only I was there like an ancient tree, standing alone after the storm season had passed. He froze for a long while. Then he said softly, "Mother," just one word, but I heard it like a breeze cutting through my chest. "Mother. I have been to many places looking for you. I didn't call because I knew maybe you did not want to hear from me." I said nothing, just remained silent like a lake covered with fog. There were no more tears. I no longer felt suffocated, only a terrifying calm. Alexander took a few steps toward me. His eyes began to redden. "Mother, forgive me. I know I do not deserve it. But Mother, I cannot keep living if I do not bow before you." Once I looked at him, a grown man crying like a child. Yet I did not run to embrace him. I did not stroke his hair. I did not say a word. Nothing is wrong. Mom is here. She had died in the snow, and that was what stopped me from being as soft as I used to be. "Since you are here, come inside the house," I said. My voice sounded deep, not cold. It was no longer warm, though. However, I cannot promise to say what you want to hear. We sat down in the small kitchen. The window was slightly open. A gentle breeze drifted through the thin curtains. Ernest and Anna exited quietly, leaving Elias, my mother, and son sitting across from each other after a winter longer than any season before. Alexander was gripping the hot tea mug tightly in his hand. The steam rising blurred his eyes. "I cannot live with the silence, Mom." Since that day, I only see the image of Mom standing in the snow. Every night I dream that Mom calls my name, then vanishes. I did not look at him. I just listened. Not because I needed to, but because I was ready to face the situation. "Lucy has left me," he continued softly, as if confessing. "I lost my job, my family. But what hurts most is not that loss, but the feeling that I have abandoned the person who loved me unconditionally." I sighed. Not bitterly or resentfully, just a weariness that had not been spoken of for too long. I called him by his name, Alexander, for the first time in many years. Do you know how I lived after that day? I sat alone in the middle of the snowy forest, thinking I was just an old object no one needed. His hand trembled as he dropped the teacup. I am a terrible son. But Mom, please, if there is even a small space in your heart, let me come back. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sunset was painting the trees red. I recalled the moment when I was sitting, curled up in the cold shack surrounded by snow, unsure if I would survive. I turned around. I spoke softly, yet each word was as clear as snow falling in the night. "I have not survived for you to beg forgiveness again. I live because I know I can still live for myself. Do you want me to forgive you? I have already forgiven myself. Not you. I do not need your forgiveness to find peace. I need you to relearn how to be human," Alexander said with a broken voice. "Even if you do not accept me, I must kneel here because you are my mother forever." I looked at my son, who had been in my womb for 9 months, who had learned to say Mom in the yard of our house, and who now knelt before me, suffering like a lost soul. And I realized that I no longer hated him, but I could not turn back either. I gently placed my hand on his shoulder. Stand up. You do not have to kneel anymore. But I will not be the old mother who forgot herself for you. Then what do you want me to do to make up for it?" He looked up with a desperate gaze. I smiled, a smile both sad and gentle. "Learn to be kind, not to me, but to those who remain." I did not push him away, but I also did not hold him back. I simply opened the door and let the wind come in, carrying away the old things that had frozen my heart. I had forgiven, yet I had not forgotten. I did not walk Alexander to the door when it closed behind me. I stayed still for a long time, staring at my hands, the fingers that had trembled when I curled up in the snow and now were gripping a warm cup of tea tightly. Something inside me had truly shut down, not out of coldness, but with a sense of maturity. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual. The sky had just begun to lighten, and a gentle mist still covered the landscape, but my heart felt as light as if winter had finally ended. Standing before the mirror, I studied my face, every wrinkle, every gray hair. I was no longer the mother who lived only for her children. I was no longer the woman abandoned in the snowy forest. Now I was Claire, a woman who was beginning a new chapter, even if late, but it was hers alone. I started doing small things, like planting some flower beds behind the house, preparing for Anna each afternoon, and reading to the elders at the community center. Then it dawned on me that there were many older people like me who had spent their entire lives living for others until there was no one left to live for. They had forgotten how to live for themselves. I wrote the story of my life in a small notebook and made a few copies. I brought them to all the elderly people in the local care centers. I visited each place not to seek thanks, but to listen. I sat beside the elderly woman whose daughter had taken her to the hospital and who had never returned. She said, "I keep sitting at the door waiting for the car to come back, yet maybe they no longer needed her." I did not tell her everything would be fine. Instead, I held her hand tightly and whispered, "It is all right now. We have each other." I began joining small groups, like a reading group for seniors, a diary and memoir writing circle, and a judgment-free listening group. At the church and wherever I went, I found stories like mine, stories of pain and loss, but also a deep desire to find meaning in the remaining time of their lives. I shared how writing could serve as an outlet, how memories could be used as a path toward healing. I never taught anyone poetry or literature, only said, "Write as if you are speaking to yourself at your weakest moment." Curiously, one by one, people started to blossom from within. There was a lonely man of 74 who had sunk into depression after his wife's death. After hearing me tell stories over several sessions, he began writing letters to himself. There was a woman who had once contemplated ending her life, but who now smiled remembering what she had written and said, "I am still worth something." One day, a young volunteer from the center embraced me tightly after sharing a story. "Mrs. Claire, I hope to have the peace you carry now when I reach your age." I smiled, hugged the girl back, and replied, "There is no need to wait until you are older, child. Peace is something you can choose right now." I no longer lived holding on to the hope that Alexander would return, but I no longer hated him either. I understood that people can make serious mistakes, yet still have the right to seek their own redemption, as long as they do not harm others. As for me, I now choose to live fully for those who remain by my side, for the eyes that have lost hope, for the elderly hands longing to be held once more. I live for Claire, the one who survived, the one who forgave, the one who began again after the coldest winter. Every morning when I open my eyes, I no longer wonder if someone will remember me today. Instead, I ask what I can do for myself and someone like me today. In the end, I got through it not by revenge or retaliation against others, but by moving forward on my own feet. I am Claire, and I am living a late life, more beautiful and fulfilling than ever. Every morning I wake at dawn, prepare a hot teapot, and open the old wooden door to welcome the sun. The sun here is not scorching. It is gentle like the breath of time, warm and unhurried. I no longer count my age in years. I count the days when I feel at peace, when I find a reason to smile. This house is not large, yet I have never felt lacking. In the garden there are a few flower beds, some rows of vegetables. Inside there is a desk, an old bookshelf, and several photo frames of moments shared with friends I met at the senior center. They are the family life gave me when my closest relatives were no longer near enough to hold my hand. I no longer torment myself over what I have lost, nor do I cling to the past. I have endured the coldest winters, faced the heaviest silences, and in the end I understood. Forgiving is not about doing a favor. Forgiving is a way to free oneself from the chains of one's own history. Alexander still sends me letters from time to time, letters that demand nothing, that do not justify or beg. They simply tell me he is trying to live differently, that he knows how to listen, how to care, how to ask forgiveness from those he has hurt. I read them and then keep them safe. I do not reply, but I know that in some way he is healing too. As for me, I no longer live in anyone's shadow. I go to places I desire, speak with people I value, write what I believe is meaningful, and sometimes I just sit under the shade of a tree, closing my eyes, letting the wind whisper through my hair. You have lived long enough. Now it is time to live for yourself. I continue sharing stories not only for people to listen, but to realize that every individual holds a life chapter worth writing. Even if they have been abandoned, felt lonely, or believe they no longer matter. I lead some writing classes for elderly people. We do not focus on fine literature or perfect handwriting. Instead, we explore nostalgia, forgiveness, and the reason to keep going. Each time an elderly person stands up after class, they hug me and say, "Mrs. Clare, I no longer feel invisible. I know I am following my own path." I do not expect a happy ending because I no longer live to hope for anything. I live to experience, to love, to be grateful, and to share this with those who thought it was too late to begin. Now I am an old teapot, a storyteller, a survivor, and above all, someone reborn. No one can completely remake their entire life, yet anyone at any age can start right now. I choose to live the part of life I have left at peace and with open arms. If there is one thing I have learned through everything that has happened, it is that people can lose everything, their family, their shelter, their faith. But if they still hold on to a bit of courage to keep living, they can find themselves again. I once thought being a mother was the most important role in my life, living to sacrifice, to love, to be patient, and to wish that my children had all they needed. I forgot that a mother is also a human being who has a heart with limits and deserves to be loved properly. I believe my children were the entire purpose of my existence until they turned their backs on me and left me alone in the snow. It was then that I understood no one, not even my own blood, can determine my worth except myself. The pain I felt was not just the betrayal of a child, it was the shattering of a lifetime built on misplaced trust. Yet at the moment that seemed like the end, deep in a snowy pine forest, curled up against the bone-chilling cold, I heard the voice from within my heart whisper softly. It asked, "Do I still live?" The answer was not to wait for someone to come back, but to realize that the old, wrinkled woman who had been abandoned could still begin anew. I learned to write, to count, and to open my heart. I joined the community with empty hands but a heart full of empathy, and that became the true wealth I gained in the time I had left. I no longer lived to please others, but to be a friend to myself, and to help people like me find light in the darkest corners of their lives. I have forgiven, but forgiveness is not acceptance or forgetting. Forgiveness is the choice to free oneself from the chains of the past, refusing to allow the one who hurt me to control my soul for one more day. I have learned to rise again, not to prove anything to others, but to preserve my kindness and my faith in my own worth. To those who are reading this, if you have ever felt that it is too late to start over, that you have nothing in your hands, that you are alone, that you lack value, please remember me. An elderly woman who was left in the snow, someone who believed she had died, yet she lived and continues to live more beautifully than ever before. Do not wait for someone to need you, to love you, or to remember you to find meaning in your life. Live in such a way that you are the one who feels joy when you look in the mirror each morning. Listen to the story within your heart. Write it down, share it, or simply whisper it to yourself, because your story is a gift that could save someone else sitting somewhere, thinking they have nothing left to live for. I am no longer angry with Alexander. I do not live demanding anyone repay a debt of love. I live because many beautiful days remain, many good people are still around, and countless reasons exist to be grateful. Old age is not a season of decline, but a season of silence where the deepest things begin to blossom. I am Claire, and I just want to tell you one thing. Live for yourself, even if it is late. It is never too late.